Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 119th Psalm. We've been dividing these into chunks of 16 verses, and the 119th Psalm is divided into 22 stanzas of 8, so it is an acrostic whereby the opening letter of the first verse of each verse all correspond to the same letter in the Hebrew alphabet in the alphabetical order it appears. So the first 8 verses are the Hebrew letter Aleph. The final 8 are Tau. That's their A to Z. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. They did not have vowels, written characters for vowels. They only had consonants. And so that gives us our number of 176. Now, the range we most recently covered was Mame. This is chapter verses 97 through 104, and then Noon was 105 to 112. We're going to take this from 113 all the way up to 128. We're going to cover the Hebrew letters Samek and Ayin. I don't know what these corresponds to. I'm not fluent in the Hebrew original. I couldn't tell you, but I do know that it does correspond. So every opening letter of the first word of each verse we're going to review. We're not going to review all of them. Begins with that letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Verse 97, "Oh, how I love your Torah. It is my study all day long." I've described this song as one giant love ballad of the psalmist to the Torah, the laws of Moses, the writings of the Pentateuch, and everything in there. They are his source of pleasure and delight, and he is a student of it. He's not only a teacher of it, and we learn from his insights, and he had very keen insights into the positive benefits and the blessings of devoting your life to learning and living the law. And the law is an expression of love, and the tragedy is that we do not love it as much as the one who sent it to us. "I have more understanding than all my teachers, for your witnesses are my study." So he had human teachers. He was a teacher, and he eventually, the student became the master because he surpassed and transcended all of his human instructors, but he remained a student of the author of the law, the divine author who inspired it and whose will it was. But if he had stood further than his predecessors, it was because he stood on the shoulder of giants who stood before him, to appropriate the humility of Sir Isaac Newton. "I have understood more than the aged, for I have observed your orders." This psalmist may have been middle-aged. He probably wasn't young, but, it's an oversimplification to suggest that the elderly are automatically to be revered and respected as the wisest among us. Certainly any person who lives will, by the sheer acquirement of experience, will be wiser than they were when they were younger. But not all the, wise is a relative term. To be truly wise is not, it seems to be genetically endowed. So not everyone, and wisdom is not the exclusive monopoly or possession of the elders, of our elders and the ancients. And what I say to you, if you are at or around my age, is what Paul said to Timothy: let no one despise you because of your youth. Verse 103, "How sweet to my taste your word has been, more than honey to my mouth." So he had an appetite, and he consumed the word. He was digesting it, reading it, absorbing it, digesting it all day, every day, throughout the day. This was his constant pursuit, and he pursued it as a sweet. It had an effect that was comparable to the sweetness of honey. And he, just to meditate on this words, now he speaks of the practice of meditation. In the meditation, often he references that word. Hebrew meditation is not a silent practice. The Hebrew word for meditate translates as mutter, so they were in the practice of saying it out loud, so that connects it to my mouth, the final 3 words of that verse. Verse 105, this takes us to the letter of Noon. In the 105th verse of this chapter is the most familiar, well-recited, famous, needs no introduction, at least to, most students of the Bible. "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." So the word provides illumination, enlightenment, perspective, and depth, and an awareness of where you are going. It provides direction, and it is a compass which guides the feet. The covenant way is compared to a path, so we have to have our feet clad to walk through the straight and narrow and avoid the obstacles and pitfalls of the way that is darkness. The world is enraptured and subsumed in darkness, but in his word we have a light which can guide us to the exalted expectation. 111th verse, your witnesses are my inheritance forever, for they are the joy of my heart. The joy of my heart, that means he delighted it, he treasured in it above all else and above all others. This is a preeminent source of his affection and adoration and love and loyalty was to the witnesses and the studying them. They were his inheritance. These are the inheritance of the Jewish people. They alone had special revelation until the Christians came. I have inclined my heart to do your laws forever to the end. So there's an element of eternality. The law emanates from an eternal one, and we have to endure in our mortal life, which is really as a flicker in a vapor in this grand scheme of eternity. But we have to, how we live this life does have eternal ramifications. And if we genuinely desire and orient ourselves and align our hearts to learn and love his law, forever to the end, he who endures to the end, the same shall be saved. We read in the Mount Olivet Discourse. This 113th verse, this is the letter Samek. This is the lesson itself. I have hated doubting thoughts, but I have loved your Torah. Read two words, hate and love, and it is an oversimplification to suggest that the Christian is going to, they are to be in love with everyone and everything. We are to hate sin, and we have to cultivate the balancing act. So it's not unrighteous to hate certain things. We ought to hate the fact that children are starving in the world, that there is war, that there is corruption, that there is chaos, that there is sin. But we have to cling to the love the law and learn the law and live the law. And the doubting thoughts, now this is ultimately translated as double-minded, and a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. We read of in James 1:8 and also in Matthew 6:24 and Luke 16:13. No man can serve two masters. You have to have, the psalmist hated those who dabbled and just dabbled in their love of loyalty, adoration, and affection to Yahweh. They were of divided loyalties. But doubt is not necessarily sinful. Doubt can lead to unbelief, so it's not the presence of doubt in your mind is not a sign of unrighteousness, but you have to use that doubts to express it out loud, and you will receive an answer and a confirmation. So don't let doubt get the final word. And doubting is not a sin, but unbelief is. A doubting mind struggles to believe, an unbelieving mind refuses to believe. You don't want to be so hardened by doubt that you just develop the unpardonable sin of unbelief. You are my hiding place and my shield. I have waited for your word. He is a refuge, a source of solace and security and just protection from the enemies of life. The psalmist was no stranger to persecution and affliction, and he had enemies who lied about him, who set traps for him, and just were in every way against him. But he had the ark of safety and the ark of the rock of refuge and Yahweh on high, and he's patiently waiting for his word. He can't get enough of it. It's torture and agony for him to go even a moment of the day without the word. That's how much he loves it. Turn away from me, you evildoers, for I observe the commandments of my Elohim. Earlier in the passage, the chapter, it's pretty vast, so I can't remember quite where. But he says, turn me away, for every false way I have hated. Therefore I hated every false way. It's actually in verse 104, 104b. And that connects to this because the principle of association, evil people gravitate and are attracted to and surround themselves and mingle and associate with evil doers. That's just the way we are. That's just the way they are. Righteous people tend to gravitate around righteous company and do not let evil company corrupt good manners. 1 Corinthians 15:33. But he's And he's going to cling to the observance and the living out and the learning of the commandments no matter what, and he just wants, to be away from evil influences in order that he may attain that without distraction and not have the obstacles. Again, of course, the presence of evil is necessary to refine our faith, much like our hatreds are rooted in our loves. Support me according to your word, that I might live, and do not put me to shame because of my hope. So the word is a source of life. It's also a source of sustenance and nourishment throughout the life. It is also a source of life itself. It is called the word of life, throughout the Bible, Old and New Testament. But it also it sustains us, and it gives us the ingredients we need to endure the day. And the practice I like to recommend for daily survival in the spiritual warfare is the book of Proverbs. There's one chapter for every day of the month. More months have 31 days in them than do not. In the Psalms, there's the devotional guideline I like to recommend for people. So there's 150 of them, 30 months and a lot of 30 days and a lot of months. So you read them 5 days at a time. And heads up, the 24th is when you have to read the 119th Psalm. It's always dreadful, but once you get through it, you are enriched for it. And I've never... all the time I'm thinking, I go through the cycles. I've been repeating it monthly for quite a while, and I always dread it, but I always feel better having done it. But and do not put me ashamed because of my hope. We are not ashamed of our confession of the resurrection. This is our source of hope, and we should not be ashamed. The apostles were not shamed. He's speaking of some positive hope, and one of the most attractive and beneficial elements of the word is the promises therein. There's actually only one verse in all 176 verses that doesn't have a direct or indirect reference to the word, and that is the 122nd one. That's in the next letter. We're not quite there yet. Sustain me that I might be saved, and always look to your laws. So he's the source of life and vitality. He's also the source of nourishment. He's also the source of sustenance. He sustains us and enables us to endure and intact, and that we might be saved. And we are not saved by looking for his laws or observing them. The law exists to expose our need of salvation, but that we obey because we are saved. We are not saved because we obey. So even when we are saved, that does not absolve us of the necessity to look to his laws and study them, even though not every one of them is applicable to the new Christian of the current dispensation. There is an underlying subterranean spiritual principle that is all worthy of unlocking and unleashing and understanding. You have made light of all those who stray from your laws. For falsehood is their deceit. So the word exposes the human character. It is a two-edged sword which cuts to the motivation of the discerner of the spirits and the souls in Hebrews 4:12. So some people stray from the laws, they stick with it for a while, and they abandon it. And the consequences for coming to a saving understanding and awareness and knowledge of salvation and forsaking it are more devastating than if you die in ignorance. This much is communicated in Hebrews 10:26-27 and 2 Peter 2:20-21. But falsehood is deceit. These are synonymous terms. They live by law. If you live by lies, if you lie, I'll become. If you live to lie, you become a living lie, and then your just life is just a facade and a dishonesty. And one lie is a web that has to protect another. It's a chain reaction. That's why a white lie is so dangerous, because even from it can emerge potentially, not always necessarily so, but a whole web of lies that are spun to protect the original lie. So white lies, they're context sensitive. I do it too. I'm not perfect, but I got to warn about staying away from them. They're not always as innocent. And sometimes it's just better to say nothing at all than to say a white lie. Often it is, in fact. No comment. You have made to cease all the wicked of the earth like dross. Therefore I have loved your witnesses. So the wicked, the dross is the scum which would have accumulated in the refining process of gold and silver smelting. The dross would have been the scum, which was the impurities, which were refined through the process of fire. And such is the way you have made. I'm not entirely sure of what he's being made to cease from, so I'm just going to skip that. And rather than tell a white lie and act like I know, I do not understand everything I read, and that's just doesn't mean I'm not qualified to teach. It just means I'm human. And the true wisdom consists in your own ignorance, but we don't want to, advertise that too much. We want to stick to what we do know. I got to give you something better than that. But he once more he returns to his first love, the central preeminent source of love, loyalty, adoration, and affection was to the law of Elohim and the Elohim of the law. My flesh has trembled for fear of you. I am in awe of your judgments. So even though he loves the Father, he also fears him, and this is another essential balancing act. We have to complement and supplement our love by our fear. Now, a mature believer's sense of love will exceed their sense of fear, but fear is where we all began, and no matter how much we advance, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we could lose it all, that we could fall to perdition. So we have to fear him for what he can do to us, but obey him not because we fear the consequences of disobedience, but because we genuinely love them. That's where the balance in the equation subs. So the fear of Yahweh is the fear which eliminates and expels all other fears. It puts our other fears in perspective when we have the hope that we will be, the helmet of salvation, fill your head with thoughts of salvation. If you're ever suffering from wandering thoughts or thoughts of negativity, just pray, fill and flood your head with thoughts of salvation, and always remain in awe and in reverence and in fear and trembling of his judgments, because they could happen to you and they're going to happen to sinners, and those who, we are all sinners, but those who die in their sins. This 121st verse marks ayin, the next letter in the Hebrew alphabet. This is going to take us to the 128th verse. I have done judgments in righteousness. Leave me not to my oppressors. So he's telling him, just have an awareness and acknowledge of the fact. He knows that he already knows that he is true. Of course, Yahweh is the all-seeing, all-knowing, all in the sky. So he knows that this psalmist is not an idle boast when he says he is, doing judgments in righteousness, that he is enacting and reflecting the righteousness and the judgment that radiates from his law. He's doing his part out there. But one of the consequences of living by righteousness is that you are guaranteed to endure the hatred and hostility of the world that you are trying to save. So he's just, don't let the oppressors have the last word. Do not let me be defeated, and let me emerge triumphant over my oppressors. Don't leave me to their mercies. Let me endure and triumph over the very real presence of persecution. Guarantee your servant's well-being. Let not the proud oppress me. So he wants an assurance, he's this isn't a faithless statement, how he says guarantee. To ask for a guarantee, would be a little presumptuous, at least in the English language as we understand. But a lot of the nuances, the linguistic nuances, are not accurately captured or completely 100% reflective in the Hebrew to English translation. But, it's not unrighteous to want to, be healthy, happy, and whole. And, even in persecution, we can take comfort. But it's not unrighteous of us to pray to live in, peace and civility. But, the very real potentiality, the pride is what compels exploitation and oppression, because some people think they are better than other people, so they have to diminish other people and make them subservient and beneath them. So the the existence of proud people, with the existence of proud people comes the reality of oppression. It's one of the 7 deadly sins, pride. It's the sin that caused Lucifer to fall from his exalted station as the supremely magnificent angel. My eyes have pined away for your salvation, and for your word, your righteousness. We recently read that phrase pined away twice in succession in our not too distant lesson before this. But to pine away is just to labor for, look for, really pine, look for it, and do not take your eyes off of it. You are pining away. There's an element of exhaustion in pining, but we endure anyway. And salvation is the most exalted, it's the humblest hope and most exalted expectation that we can have, and our eyes ought to pine away. We have to be looking to the treasures in the kingdom of heaven, as the Master advises us to do in the Sermon on the Mount, the 6th chapter, as recorded in Matthew. The word is a reflection of his righteousness, and it enables us and equips us and educates us on the ramifications and the standards of righteousness. So the word is his righteousness, but it also makes us righteous, more righteous. It's a relative term when speaking of humans. Do with your servant according to your kindness, and teach me your laws. He is asking him to have mercy on his servant. He knows that he's aware that his servant is being oppressed, and he does consider himself 2 things. He considers himself a servant and a student. So the servant exists to, make life easier and to do the work that needs to be done for a master, and a student learns from a teacher. So he has these 2 things, but as a student, he wants, as a servant, he wants to be treated, accommodated, not compensated, but just treated in proportion. Treat him as an ally. Don't let persecution unnecessarily come my way. I've been through the ringer before. But he also wants him to teach his laws, even though he writes with the expertise of authority on these laws. He remains open and pliable and willing and eager to learn more that can be learned, because he knows he cannot scratch the surface of the depths of the law in one lifetime, and neither can we. We can spend an entire lifetime studying it and still be amazed. And the psalmist is praising to be amazed once more and always. I am your servant. Make me understand, that I might know your witnesses. So as the servant, he appeals to him to make him a better student. He knows that the human faculties, the finite and imperfect and just flawed and unreliable cognitive potentials of humanity, remember, the things of the Spirit cannot be understood divorced from the Spirit or apart from the Spirit. This much is communicated by Paul in his 2nd chapter of his 1st epistle to the Corinthians. So apart from the author of the knowledge, the author of the word is the one who teaches us the word. So you can listen to human interpretations, but if you stay stuck on that level and you do not hear the voice of divinity speaking to you, then you're not going to make it. It is time for Yahweh to act, for they have broken your Torah. So he considers instant retribution to be fitting and appropriate for a violation and an offense of Yahweh's Torah, his law, which is his will and his desire for us to live by. So when we offend the law or violate the law, we invite consequences. Not all of them are immediate, but they are there eventually and inevitably. They do come. Your sin will find you out, and you will reap the karmic boomerang. You will reap what you sow. You inflict pain, you receive pain, you cause harm and suffering. You are invited by harm and suffering. And it's all under the sovereign command and control of Yahweh, who punishes the wrongdoers, not always in this lifetime, but certainly in the next without fail. So moral of the story, don't be an offender of the law. Therefore I have loved your commandments more than gold, even fine gold. So once more, this is a love ballad, start to finish, of his love for the law, and the commandments is a facet of the law. It is one of the 8 terms that are used synonymously and interchangeably. I think none of the stanzas have less than 6 of these 8 terms. And 3 of them do have all 8, but commandments are one of them. And he pronounces a woe unto the love of riches, which, as we read in the New Testament, 1 Timothy 6:10, the love of money and riches is the source of all evil. A lot of the familiar colloquial phrase is money is the root of all evil. It's not money itself. Money is morally neutral. Our attitude and how we handle and treat and value money is a reflection, and it often, money is not evil in itself, but it makes people do evil things, and the evilness, the money is not to blame. First off, it is an artificial, humanly constructed concept, but it is convenient and efficient for the exchange of goods, but the danger is that if you gain and hoard wealth, then you will shut yourself out from God and others. So rather than love the treasures of the earth, we must treasure and value the treasures of heaven. Seek ye first the kingdom, and all the rest shall be added unto you. Our lesser concerns, our temporal, fleeting, physical concerns. 128th and final verse. Therefore all orders I count as right. I have hated every false way. The psalmist was not in the practice of cherry picking what commandments he would or would not obey. There's the 3-letter word all entails an element of totality. So he didn't, he knew that everything that emanated from the mind and the mouth and the heart and the hand of the Almighty was right and righteous, and he is completely correct and intrinsically so, and literally incapable of being morally flawed in any way, shape, or form. And that from this love and this clinging stems hatred for every false way. Once more, the element of totality is there in the 5-letter word every. So every false way, he did not cherry pick, he did not take it personally, he was not partial to any false way that had personally afflicted him. He despised every false way equally so, and we ought not be selective. We can justify our false ways, but not like it when others act falsely with us. We have to have the same attitude. We have to hate every false way, including and especially when we are the false ones. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.